I believe Black Lives Matter. It's easy for me to. It's for selfish reasons. By looking at me, I'm all of us in one. I too would like to see all people be racially empathetic. Unfortunately, we're far away from adopting a process that creates an inner peace for all people. Noble sentiments at times creates the biggest pitfalls and challenges to a more peaceful existence. Sharing abstract belief is only possible if we believe in the rule of law promoting individual liberty. The greatest danger is having good laws administered badly. Our goal shouldn't be perfection. We should strive to do the greatest good through the most pardonable inconveniences. Regardless of our ethnicity, how you see yourself is a choice. I opt to be proactive even when I'm scared. And I do this instead of complaining. Fear cannot be without hope, nor hope without fear. I have a degree in business, and I enjoy teaching myself economics, history. I'm a big fan of philosophy, love baseball, while I practice and advocate for openness and transparency. Openness begins with the ability to self-critique and reflect upon things central to one's own beliefs, thoughts, actions, your behavior, and results. On January 2018, I feared self-complacency was no longer an option and started collecting signatures to run for U.S. President in 2020. How can we avoid strategies of divide and conquer, ignore the distracting social media messages we're inundated with, and instead create a way for us to work with all citizens in government, since we are all one, in a format that eliminates these ingrained fears by using and learning about supply, demand, and economic paradoxes? Science and many of the human sciences are beautifully based on evidence-based, fact-yielding work. The problem is that many of the most important aspects of existence, there's simply no facts available. The big question that bedevil us, individually or as a group collectively, have no fact to appeal to. How should we live? What's the right economic system to institute? What sort of relationship should we have? What choices should we make? Who are we, and what do we want and need? In the face of these dilemmas, we may long for facts, but what we really mean is we're looking for answers we can be assured will be indisputably correct. But we invariably face ambiguity, and whatever answers we come up with or formulate, a degree of loss and the risk of blindness and error. It is these elements which those of us who avoid addressing these questions rationally, I feel deep down, are especially intolerant towards and upset about. Their hatred of bias reflects a longing for a world without a need for hard choices and the sacrifices these necessarily entail. We may well long to stick to facts, but we eventually have to try to lead our lives according to values, which are inherently much more contentious and complicated in structure. I think the most unfortunate thing regarding being negative or nihilism is not the loss of the ability to believe, but the inability to see the beauty, opportunities, and possibilities of things and events occurring around us daily. So as a result, the surest way we corrupt ourselves or the American people and encourage splitting, continue to discourage unity through community building and self-reliance, is to instruct citizens to only hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. I feel that an elite is needed not only to govern, but to enable people to govern themselves, since no problem can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. If you guys don't know who Frederick Hegel is, he's someone who wrote some very long and very famous books. Among them was The Phenomenology of the Human Spirit, the Science of Logic and Elements of the Philosophy of Rights. Unfortunately, his work and rhetoric is confusing and complicated instead of clear and direct. He overly used incomprehensible prose, which has made his philosophy much weaker and tougher for reader to understand, but there's 3 lessons we can learn from Friedrich Hegel. First, important parts of ourselves could be found in history. During his time, a standard way at looking at the past was to consider as primitive and to feel proud of how much success has been made to get to the modern age. He argued every era could be looked at as the depository of certain kinds of wisdoms. What does this mean? This means we need to go back in time to rescue things which have gone missing. For example, we might need to mine the history of ancient Greece to fully grasp the idea of what community can be. Today, we can learn from the successful application of something like Epicurean philosophy, which enables and promotes happiness in democratic societies, despite communism being a corrupt, unsuccessful attempt at Epicureanism. The Middle Ages can teach us about the role of honor, despite this period's appalling attitude towards children or the right of women. We have to rescue from the past ideas to compensate for the blind past of the present, since progress is never linear. Secondly, we have to learn from ideas we dislike. We should listen carefully to our intellectual enemies, since bits of the truth are always getting scattered to unappealing and peculiar places, and we must put in the work to make sense of them. For example, nationalism has made many terrible manifestations. You have white supremacy in Australia, the forgotten generation, racial scapegoating. Why do you think that is? Could it be the need for people to feel proud from where they come from and anchor their identity beyond the ego? And thirdly, progress is messy. We make progress by going from one extreme to another as we seek to compensate for previous mistakes. Hegel believed it takes 3 moves before the right balance of the issue could be found, a process he called the dialectic. Lastly, despite our fears, we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to do more, talk less, since talk is so cheap. We have to stop searching for new masters and instead master ourselves by telling ourselves proactive stories as we face reality head on. What should my approach be in an effort to reach Latinos and people of color who are upset with what's happening in America today, and after Black Lives Matter stops trending in the media? I like to think of my style as one that empathizes. It empathizes with Latino and people of color, always accepts the person regardless of race, encourages all peaceful protests and self-reflection, but sometimes refuses some people of color, whites too, as good enough. Since I'm also flawed, I'm always trying to listen intently, yet my common defense mechanism is to project my personal mission statement. I usually say, place no expectation on others when sharing love, kindness, and good vibes, since at times you'll go unnoticed, unheard, ignored, and unvalidated. Despite this, I strive to be conscious, grateful, forgiving, envisioning a perfect future in the moment, and blessed. At best, I see myself as an absolute silly hero who's trying to live his life to the fullest, hates death while being condemned to a life of meaningless tasks. I choose to stay positive despite knowing that modern life is spent at feudal jobs in retail offices along with other flawed people. As most of you know, I grew up in the Mount Hope section of the Bronx to a single mom who had 2 boys by her 20th birthday. I don't profess to have all the answers or have a one-size-fits-all solution that leads to universal happiness. But I know what worked in my house. Expectations. Your first and most important teacher is your family. School, called finishing school for a reason, is second. Everything else is subjective and open for debate. An adult who works 85 hours per week in order to have all the latest toys isn't doing anything wrong, but toys can't mend underwhelming childhood memories. I Respect individual preferences, since what motivates me may not motivate you. As it turns out, the majority of mental health professionals become interested in the field looking for answers to help treat themselves. My guess is that the nucleus of the African American family has an enormous amount of built-in trauma, no thanks to our history. I highly recommend anyone who relates to this trauma or this type of trauma to read a book titled The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. This book taught me openness and awareness begins with the ability to self-critique and reflect upon things that are central to one's own belief, your thoughts, your actions, your behavior, more importantly, results. Ideally, all capable people should look for reasons to start or continue the work of self-improvement. Nobody is equal to anybody. Even the same person's not equal to him, herself on different days. I feel that the first step to continuous improvement, regardless of race, is to know yourself, is to practice consciousness, and to be in the moment. A common misconception is that elite schools and neighborhoods are free of flawed people. That's not true. Despite this, how can we continue to encourage well-intentioned discussion to bring people together? If we're serious, it's necessary to agree the resistance we face is either conscious or unconscious. If well-meaning citizens insist they have nothing to hide, understand what's involved, and have a strong motivation, we can only assume the resistance must be unconscious. My ambitious goal is to bring attention to the things we don't think we're bad at and help individuals work through the unconscious resistance. Warning. Again, warning. This will involve a great deal of introspection, and even then, is an extremely difficult job. One doesn't usually have proper insight into one's own emotional makeup. Most of us spend our time trying to rationalize our behavior as a result of our lack of self-awareness. I remember going shopping in Manhattan while I was in high school back in 1995 and thinking I was being watched. This was true at times, but mostly in my head. Maybe it's wrong of me to make this video and share my view, since I live in a state of dissatisfaction with how we talk to ourselves. At times, while I was in high school, I felt alienated, cut off from others and myself. Was everybody else contented and untroubled? Were white people and other people contented and untroubled? No. Self-talk is an integral part of the human condition. We live within language, yet our way of life is something we find hard to see. Indeed, as long as there is language, it will confuse us. We will face temptations to misunderstand, and there is no vantage point outside of it. There is no escape from language games then on how we talk to ourselves, but we can forge a kind of freedom from within them. We might first need to be stupid or embrace our insignificance if we are to see this. One has to be selfless and egoless to give perfect guidance as to where to draw the line regarding race. When you draw a line, it exposes your preferences and biases. On occasions, lines are drawn. People will draw a line in different places. But as soon as you admit that an extreme is not possible and that a line has to be drawn, you are, on your own argument, done for. Since you're trying to persuade us that as soon as one moves an inch in the planned direction, you are necessarily launched on the slippery path which will lead to racial anarchy. She who looks outside for answers dreams. Who looks inside awakes. We are the stories we tell ourselves. On days you feel you can't get out of bed because of negative thoughts, remind yourself you're a spirit with a body, not a body with a spirit. Don't expect perfection in government with regards to politics, but make sure to always vote. Don't presume rationality will triumph. The wise does everything to assume that error and folly will try to have their way and create structures to contain them. The wise never expects one person can be everything to them or fix their problems with an eloquent speech. Respectfully yours, Jose Franco. That's all I have for you today.